We are in Modena in the company of Simon Starling, who has been invited to inhabit our museum with his work, and the exhibition he's created. It's titled Metamorfuoco. Simon, what does Metamorfuoco means?
I suppose, it's a slightly, maybe it's a sort of slightly clumsy collage of sort of two Italian words that was been kind of put together by a monolingual artist. But for me, it sort of evokes the sort of transformative power of fire. But it also has this sort of almost sort of trans-historical sense that is very much embodied in the exhibition. The idea of taking a kind of ancient artwork as a starting point for an exhibition, and I hope the title sort of evokes a lot of the ideas that are embodied in that artwork, the Tintoretto painting. There's also a subtitle to the exhibition, Sotto, luce di Tintoretto. Is that right? Yeah.
It is very right.
And that's also this kind of, I had this idea that somehow that it sort of evokes the experience of encountering a 400 or 500-year-old work, which still can kind of captivate you in the present moment. And with the Tintoretto paintings, which were made when he was half my age, you can feel his sort of youthful, urgent sort of energy in the work, and I think that the title, the subtitle was sort of put there to try to embody that initial kind of contact with the work, which I had almost a year ago now, when you invited me to come and start to think about the project.
So I like this pull almost at this ancient artwork.
Yeah.
Exerted on your artist self. So the story of Tintoretto that's taken you such a strong hold on you is one about metamorphosis.
Yeah.
And about the danger of playing with fire.
Yeah.
I suppose the fall of Phaeton.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is key to the story that you've
yeah. Of course,
gathered.
The story is a much older story. It's a story from Ovid, which was the kind of frame for this whole cycle of paintings that you have here in the museum. And I guess I'm often working with sort of pre-existing artworks as starting points for my own projects and exhibitions, and it's always about trying to find a kind of a contemporary sense or truth in a sort of a pre-existing work. And I guess when I came across the fall of Phaeton, the Tintoretto painting, it just seemed to have a very sort of urgent relevance, contemporary relevance, and so that's why this kind of train of thought began, to sort of piece together this. It's a kind of collage of an exhibition in a way. Taking existing artworks of my own, works made by architects and sort of ready-mades in a sense, sort of redeploying things that I found around the museum, activating them in relation to the sort of themes that were evolving in the exhibition. So yeah, I think it's a very collaborative exhibition in a way. There are many there are many characters present in the exhibition. You know, car designers and telescope builders and mask makers and of course painters, Tintoretto. So yeah, and I suppose I'm sort of stage managing the whole affair.
Yes, you've called many different collaborators, as you said, many different objects and voices to speak your story, and just your it's not a story, your observation of the effect of men on the environment, because that's one of the themes that seems to run through your exhibition, and that is something that you have seen in the Tintoretto, which perhaps I've never really noticed, even though I looked at this painting almost every day. So can you tell me more about this?
I mean, of course,
urgency of that.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, these are things, you know, as the work in the exhibition shows, these are things that I've been working with and thinking about for a long time, you know. And in a way, there's a sort of, there's a sort of serendipity, if you like, to the fact that, you know, we've just had this extraordinary dry summer, especially in northern Italy. You know, when I flew into Modena, I looked down at the Po River, which is the river apparently that Ovid imagined Phaeton falling into. And when you see the river, you know, Phaeton would have had a very tough landing, you know, because it's a little trickle of a stream now. And, you know, that when I started out on this project, I didn't know those things were going to play out in the meantime. But so it does feel like it perhaps has even more currency and relevance than it was intended to have. But sometimes things just work out like that.
So Simon, your work is not just about objects in space, but it's also about place.
Yeah.
It's also about, it's very connected with the place you're in at the moment, or the objects you're working with. So in what sense this exhibition is so radically rooted to this area, this region?
Well, in many ways, I mean, partly because of the starting point of the Tintoretto painting, but also I'm always very interested in engaging with the kind of industrial histories of places where I'm working, and so when I started to sort of conceive the exhibition, I was thinking about this idea of creating a kind of a floor that would be almost like a sort of model of how the rest of the exhibition functions on top of it. So I started to, I spent some days in the library here and looking at old illustrations, woodcuts and engravings, and sort of pieced together this sort of vocabulary of fragments of those illustrations, book illustrations, that sort of have generated this sort of collaged, fragmented image of a sort of world on fire, if you like, a burning forest. And somehow that's, I suppose, one of the reasons that museums sort of invite artists to come and work with their collections is to sort of, in some sense, sort of like, I don't know, destabilize, to shift the ground underneath the audience's feet in a way, to sort of shift the relationship between the sort of historical work and the viewer. And I suppose the floor becomes almost like a sort of, I don't know, a metaphor for that in a way. And it also becomes a way to organize the exhibition. So there are these tiles which are with printed images on, and then there are empty spaces which have become like these little, notional plinths or podiums for the individual works. So it's a sort of organizational strategy for making
almost like a geography, a map for
exactly.
following your thinking
Yeah.
about this object in space together
Yeah.
in relation to these old paintings.
Yeah.
But the novelty of this group of objects, or group of things,
Yeah.
or there is the presence of your avatar, so to speak.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
looking at us in the background
Yeah.
and talking to us
Yeah.
and explaining,
Yeah,
or telling, perhaps, telling.
He's a sort of, he's somewhere between a self-portrait, a kind of straw man, and a gallery guide, I suppose.
Yes,
you know.
a gallery guide, exactly.
And every now and again he springs into life and sort of introduces this very, very sort of condensed history of man's evolving relationship to fire. And I suppose, I mean, it's part of an ongoing interest of mine. I mean, I've always been an artist who has, valued making talks and lectures, and some of those talks and lectures have become almost like works in themselves. And I even made a stage play in collaboration with a theatre maker, and I became one of the characters in the play, and I was always trying to sort of tell the backstory of what was going on in the play. So it's a very natural thing, I suppose, to conceive as me as a sort of active agent in the sort of interpretation in a way of the object. So the straw man has this kind of animated head, and he nods towards particular things as he's telling this story. He's a strange presence.
So in a sense, you're almost inviting the visitor inside this this theater, this space that you created, where you don't explain, but you let them in the presence of your thoughts about certain things.
I mean, I suppose I like exhibitions which have a very sort of complex temporal sense that sort of unfold at different speeds. And there's different, there's the slide projection at the back, autoxylopyrocycloboros, which sort of documents this 4-hour-long sort of entropic voyage on a steamboat that sort of eats itself until the inevitable happens and it sinks to the bottom of the sea. And that unfolds through 38 slides. And then you have, and then from that extreme you have, Mike Davies's amazing telescopes, which are looking at light that was sent towards us, billions of years ago, and we're just receiving on. So there's that sort of deep time as well as these kind of more immediate, process-based projects. And somehow the straw man is trying to sort of hold all those different sort of temporal trajectories into some kind of sway, so that it's like a constellation that he's trying to hold on to so it doesn't blow apart.
Yes. So there is a sense of it to be in a trans-historical space or a journey, so to speak.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, it's very urgent and contemporary, the main theme of this exhibition, which is that of an observation of the fraught relationship of man and the environment. Do you think that art has a role to play in the discourse about climate emergency or
very much
climate
so.
action or the environment?
Absolutely. But of course, the art world is also, as we all are, part of the problem.
Exactly.
So you have to sort of find a balance there somehow and navigate. It does feel like there is that incredible sense of urgency now. I mean, I feel like the world I was born into and the world I live in now, 50-something years later, is, it's a radically different thing. And that's alarming, because it's a tiny little blip in the history of the planet. And I think there's, you know, the art world has shown itself to be fairly adaptive, and, you know, it can respond to issues and questions very fast, in fact. But the problem is the sort of mechanisms of that, and it does feel like quite a sort of behemoth sometimes, the art world, a sort of a juggernaut that only has one direction. But I think, yeah, there's sort of hope in that adaptability and what have you. But yeah, it's a complicated question, sort of how do we proceed, you know, because I'm also somebody who's I'm very interested in materials and the way things are made, and you know, there's a great kind of investment in that in the work for these kind of stories to be told. Somehow the works themselves have to have this sort of gravitational hold over the audience. They have to be compelling, and that involves investing in them as objects, and that involves, you know, that involves materials, it involves transportation, it involves energy, all these things. There's many sort of conundrums there in thinking about these things. There was a beautiful moment when the tiles were being produced, where there's these tiles which have images of fire on them, and you saw all these tiles with images of fire disappearing into the oven where they were going to be fired. And that seemed like a beautiful sort of, I don't know, encapsulation of those kind of contradictions in a way. So yeah, it's a complicated negotiation, I think, for all of us, for you as an institution, and for me as an artist.
Simon, what do you expect the public to bring away from this exhibition and your work in general?
That's a hard question. I suppose. I suppose that you know, the hope is that what people take away is, in a way, a sense of kind of continuity. I mean, fire as a sort of theme. It's a phenomena that has been, you know, vital to, you know, the evolution of man in a way, and the problems that we are facing now are, of course, you know, intrinsically linked to that evolution, and I suppose, yeah, it's you hope that people will come away with, you know, perhaps an understanding of, or a new sense of the complexity of the situation, how everything is kind of interlinked, and yeah. But it's not. I'm not an artist who. I'm not a sort of. I don't like to be preachy as an artist. I'm not a sort of pedagogical. It's about putting some ideas into play and making connections that perhaps wouldn't normally be made. You know, connections. You know, geographical connections, but also sort of connections through time.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. It's not about climate action. It's not about activism. It's about observing and thinking. Yeah. It's a very thoughtful exhibition. Good. In my mind.
Good. Yeah. It's made me think too.
Yes,
so
it made us think about our painting in a way we never thought about it before. And it's made us think about a lot of the things we take for granted, and they're not, as we've seen this summer. So thank you for your work, and thank you for keeping us on our toes.
You're welcome.